Hello, people. I finished a book. Hopefully this is bright enough. I haven't turned any lights on in here. Charlemagne, From the Hammer to the Cross. This is one of the books that I bought at King Book like 3 weeks ago. The first one was wonderful. This one was wonderful. I got one more to go. The book was written in 1959. And when I first saw that in 1959, I said, man, this is going to suck, because that just wasn't a time for intellectual pursuits. But the author, Richard Winston, is not too bad. Charlemagne was not even his name. His name was Charles. Charlemagne, apparently the main part, as some kind of a French thing, which means the great. Of course, Magnus, it would be the Latin. And Maine also is a Norse word, which means a ferocious warrior or something like that. So, his name was Charles. His father's name was Pepin, and Pepin's father was Charles Martel. Sometimes the history gets confused. Charlemagne is actually depicted as Charles Martel in some of the medieval romance crap. From the Hammer to the Cross. I don't understand why that was even in the title. Charlemagne never held the hammer. He was never a pagan. His father wasn't a pagan. His grandfather wasn't a pagan. They were all Christians. 317 pages. Took me 6 days to read it. I got quite a bit of notes here. We already talked about Charles the Great. For forever, I will refer to him as Charles the Great. I'll never call him Charlemagne again. I don't think he was all that great. He was an empire builder. Oh, I've got reading to do, so I will have to turn the light on. He was an empire builder. He took land from other people. I'm going to turn the light on. He Christianized the pagans, the Slavic peoples. The Saxons was this big, a never-ending war with the Saxons. German fighting German is all that was. The Lombards is the same thing. German fighting Germans. I'm going to go back to Gibbon again, where Gibbon, when Gibbon was talking about Charlemagne, he compared Charlemagne to the ruins of Palmyra. And he said, yeah, the ruins of Palmyra look great, but only when you look around at the desert around them do they appear great. And what Gibbon meant was there just wasn't that many great men at the time, so Charlemagne stood out. He's definitely an empire builder. So I've got last paragraph on page 36. I've got to find that. It is doubtful whether Charles ever wished to escape from these obligations. His visit to Italy was with his father's army during these impressionable years of boyhood seemed to have strengthened in him that love for the warm South, which has always been a trait of the German character. Charlemagne visited Rome 4 times and would certainly have gone there more often had he been less occupied with the affairs of a far-flung realm. Not sure why I picked out that paragraph, other than much like Frederick Barbarossa, Charlemagne was kind of obsessed with Rome and the popes. And Charlemagne, like any human alive around the year 800, that's kind of all they thought about was religion and death and the soul and the afterlife. That's literally all they thought about. Any kind of questions of science, refer back to that. There was a biographer, Einhard, who was, just in Charles's court. Now, Einhard was with him all his life, and I'm not going to try and find the biography that Einhard wrote, but he describes Charles as having a high-pitched voice, which I thought was funny. Charles was a big guy. He's 6'4", in an era when people were not big. Charles's first son, with his first wife, was named Pepin. Pepin was not an unusual name. I kind of like that name. But Pepin, his firstborn son, had a birth defect. He was a hunchback. At one point, Charles names another one of his sons Pepin, and by royal decree commands that his firstborn son forever be known as Pepin the Hunchback. He did not treat his firstborn son very well. He didn't treat his wives very well either, I didn't think. Tonsured. Every time somebody falls out of favor with Charles, they have a choice of being put to death, or much like in classic Greece, sometimes they would ask the accused if they can think of another punishment that would fit the crime. And when they did this in Charles's day, the accused would say, "Tonsure me." And I didn't know what tonsured meant. I had to look it up. Tonsured means they shave all the hair in the center of your head, so you just have a ring like a monk. And not only do you get tonsured, but you get put in a monastery for the rest of your life. So, what's worse? I don't know what's worse. Last sentence, page 57. And I've got remembered Gibbon there. To the north of his realm lay the open ocean, and there was no need for him to be concerned with that quarter until nearly the end of his reign. By then he would have accomplished within his own borders the great civilizing work on which his fame chiefly rests. He never conquered the Danes, Denmark, and towards the end of his reign, the Viking Age was beginning, and they were preying on Charles. They were going up all the rivers. They were sailing up the Rhine. They were sailing up all the rivers that run through France. And I don't know. I put remember Gibbon because we've already talked about it. Gibbon had Charlemagne down to a T. A lot of notes. Second paragraph, page 61. Okay, that's not the whole second paragraph. And I never put marks in a book, but I've put marks in this book. There were some real little gems of knowledge in this book. The other great Germanic nation that bordered Charles' Frankish kingdom was that of the Saxons. Like the Lombards, they were warlike. Unlike the Lombards, they were far from the influence of Roman culture and had retained their tribal organization as well as their ancient paganism. Moreover, they were still in their original homeland, descendants of those who had remained behind when the Angles and the Saxons went forth in wave after wave during the 6th century to conquer the island of Britain, and either enslave the original inhabitants or drive them across the channel to what thereafter became known as Brittany. What a nice clarifying little paragraph there. And the modern take on the Saxons going to England is not so much them enslaving them. They call it, now I can't remember what they call it. But it was the rich people getting all the women is what it was. Something transfer. The book had great info on the Saxon tribes and the Lombards, Charles was not an environmentalist. He instituted a campaign to exterminate wolves. People would have to do this thing called the Ordeal of the Cross, and you could decide legal matters like that. You stood with your arms outstretched. It didn't have to be you if you were the one accused. You could nominate somebody to stand like this for you, but whoever could stand like this the longest, they won. You could prove your guilt or innocence by getting a very strong man to stand with his arms outstretched, and all he had to do was hold his arms up longer than the other guy that was accusing you. The campaign in Spain, Charles was always involved. The Saracens are still in Spain. Moorish Spain is still going on, and even as Charles, lay on his deathbed, they were still in Spain. But that's where the Song of Roland comes from. The Song of Roland is a little bit different than what they have in the book. In the Song of Roland, it's the Saracens that catch up to the Frankish rear guard. In this book, this guy claims that these are actually Spanish tribesmen that killed 20,000 Frankish knights. That doesn't make sense to me. Two very enjoyable books in a row. I already said that. Bottom of 128, top of 129. Pepin, the son of Charles' first wife, Himmeltrude, was already adolescent and would perhaps be even more subject to temptation in Italy. But Charles had another reason for leaving the unlucky hunchback boy behind. For Pepin was about to be formally disinherited and to lose even the right to sole use of his name. Charles was planning to have the Pope himself baptize Hildegard's second son, Charlemagne, and to rechristen this son with the name of Pepin. So Pepin gets screwed. Charlemagne was the name of Charles's brother. The Saxons defeat a Frankish army. This war is going on, like all wars during that time period. You pretty much only fought during the summer. You had to have fodder for the horses. And Charles, at one point, calls together a lot of Saxon nobles and beheads them all. 4,500 of them. Right after this, one of his sons dies, his wife dies, so he looks at that as divine retribution. And my next note here says, "Oh, for some info on the Saxon-Frankish War." I'd love to find a gigantic book, The Saxons, and just tell me the whole history of those people. There was a Saxon king, his name was Widukind, and probably since he was German, you would say Widukind. And I have the Saxon guerrilla written there because it turns into kind of a guerrilla warfare. And I wrote gorilla like the animal because I didn't know how to spell gorilla. Second paragraph, page 174. These are those funny pages where one is like thicker than the other. At the opposite end of the Frankish kingdom, where the peninsula of Brittany jutted out into the Western Ocean, there was a smaller linguistic and national fault which was to send minor tremors through the body of France for 1,000 years to come. This peninsula had been settled by refugees from the British Isles who had fled 350 years before from the invading Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. In their native isles, the Bretons had become so debased that in Old English their name became synonymous with slave. But among the fens and forests of Brittany, they themselves were conquerors. They subjected the native inhabitants and, in spite of the smallness of their numbers, long resisted conquest by the Franks. Roland, it will be remembered, had been warden of the Breton March. Marches were narrow strips of territory carved out of the hostile country to guard the borders of the Frankish kingdom. So a marsh was like no man's land. Nordalbingia. It was very far north of the Saxon territory. That's where the last remnants of the Saxon resistance was. And 799, the Viking and Danish raids begin on the coast. There's a guy named Harun al-Rashid, and he rules from Baghdad. Harun al-Rashid and Charles both hate the Saracens that are in Spain, and they both want to keep Constantinople on its toes, so they send gifts back and forth. And this guy sends Charles an elephant. I've run into this story several times before. What's odd is the elephant actually lives for 8 years. Second paragraph, page 284. You can just imagine, I mean, in those days, that an elephant, traveling all that way and living. Medieval bestiaries tell us what Charles had hitherto known about elephants. They are mountains in bulk, for indeed elephant in Greek is called mons in Latin, and when seeking for pasture they move in flocks like sheep. Back to back they unite, but they can bear young only once in their long lifetimes of 3 centuries. If the hair of an elephant is burned in a house, snakes and all poisonous things will promptly leave it. Surely a useful property if one has an adequate supply of elephant hair. When the mother is bearing young, she is very much afraid of falling, since the form of her legs make rising again difficult. Therefore she rests by leaning against a large tree. Cunning hunters will observe the tree that the female elephant habitually uses, then cut it half through, so that it falls next time she leans against it, and she with it. That's exactly what Caesar, it was either Caesar or it was Strabo, wrote about elks 700 years before this. So that's how far science had advanced. Page 302 and 303. I don't know what that is. Oh, that's why I marked this off. If you can see this, the page is connected. It's seamless here on the bottom. I've run into this before. Does that mean nobody has ever read the book? I managed to read it by holding it and peeling them apart. There was another page like that too. I managed to read it and I just left it like that. I thought it was kind of cool. By the time Charles dies, all his heirs, except for one, are dead. And it's Louis, the one that's kind of incompetent. But he leaves everything to Louis, and Louis, of course, fucks it all up. Charlemagne's kingdom does not survive him by even 60 years. Bottom of 308, top of 309, so this is it. By that same year, at the beginning of dreary December, young Charles also died. The cause of his death is not stated, except that his last illness began with a headache. With him died, though none knew it at the time, the last hope of the Carolingian Empire might endure. 3 strong rulers, Charles the Hammer, Pepin the Short, and Charlemagne, had built a dissension-racked petty kingdom into a great empire within a single century. A 4th could have smoothed out the newly welded joints, strengthened the raw new junctions, and so consolidated the power of that empire that the Northmen would have battered in vain against its outlying defenses. Had the Carolingian Empire been given a respite of 40 or 50 years, France and Germany might never have reached a parting of the ways. That's important. I'm not sure that there was even a thing that you might call the French language at this time. There was Latin, and I'm sure that there was some kind of a old Gaulish language, but these people all spoke German. The Scandinavian colony of Normandy might never have existed, and there would have been no William to conquer England. The cultural impetus that Charles had given to all of Central Europe would not have been choked off by the Northmen. Instead of burned libraries, wrecked monasteries, and feudal castles dotting an anarchic and autarkic countryside, a prosperous civilized life might have continued to burgeon within the shelter provided by a strong centralized government. That's it. I'm not sure if I agree with what the Northmen did being all that bad. They were still pagan, and the Christians. I mean, look what Charles did. He beheads 4,500 people. He fights a 30-year war against the Saxons. He did the same thing to the Lombards. He did the same thing, just war all the time. So things worked out the way they did. It is what it is. Good book, and I've already started on another one. Thanks for watching.